Let's talk about life, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the truth and consciousness, divinity. Let's talk about God. Let's talk about love.
Welcome to Spiritual Nerd, and I'm your host, Ninette Terhart, and today we are geeking out with Gina Lake. Hello, Gina, and thank you so much for joining the show.
Hi, Ninette.
Hi. Well, before we get started, I just want to highlight a couple of little blops and pops about you in case people are tuning in and they're not familiar with who you are and the awesome stuff that you do. I'd like to start by saying Gina Lake is a non-dual spiritual teacher and an author of over 20 books about awakening to one's true nature. She is also a gifted intuitive channel with a master's degree in counseling psychology and over 25 years experience supporting people in their spiritual growth. Tremendous. Wow. Well, Gina, hello and welcome. And I would love to actually hear some highlights of your journey and how this whole path kind of unfolded for you.
Sure. It's a long story. It started a long time ago. I guess I would say it started in 1986 when my channel just opened. It just opened one day, and all of a sudden I realized that I could pose a question mentally, or if I posed a question mentally, I would receive an answer that was wise. And that was very compelling. And I must say I got quite off center for about a year after that because I thought it was so cool and I was so special and I was so young and ungrounded and I really didn't understand what I was doing. And I didn't have anybody to explain things for me. And so after about a year of being tossed about with a mixture of beings, because I think what was going on is I wasn't grounded enough and I was too egoic to reach high level beings consistently.
Okay.
So I would get really great information, and then I would also get beings that were lower astral who wanted to mess with me. You know, they're like con men in that realm. And after about a year, I decided I was too gullible and not ready to be a channel. So I stopped completely and I started meditating, and I did a lot of healing work. Actually met my second husband, who was a spiritual teacher, and he did meditative kind of work with people, energy healing, and I worked with him a lot. And after about 2 years, I was sitting one day and I heard someone say, excuse me, may I speak with you? And it was very respectful. And this being wanted to write something through me. And I thought, well, as long as I don't ask personal questions about the future, especially, that I couldn't get in trouble. And I was kind of curious to see. And I really felt that I had changed. And one of the things that changed for me was that I was able to sense the energy of the being that I was speaking to. Mm-hmm. And so I said yes, and that began a 25-year relationship with a being that called himself Theo, and he was behind all of my books until 2012, when Jesus showed up and asked me to write books for him, and Mother Mary as well. In between that, in 1999, I had a spiritual awakening. I was going to a lot of satsang at the time, and so I knew what awakening was, and I knew what it looked like from seeing the teachers. And in fact, I met my husband, Nirmala, when he was traveling and giving satsang around the country. And I had an awakening about 6 weeks after I met Adyashanti. He was very critical in my understanding and sort of preparing the ground. I was pretty ripe, so it didn't take a lot. And then I had that very profound shift. And then 2 weeks later, I met my husband, Nirmala, who, and we've been doing the, similar work all of these years. But right now, the most important thing is that I've been working with Jesus, as I said, since 2012. And just writing books, taking dictation, because I hear the words very clearly in my head. And I just write them down, and I do some editing because I think the clearer I can make it, the better for everybody.
Yeah.
And so that's the brief history.
I'd love to chat about these transmissions. I've been attending the Saturday transmissions, and I have really noticed a speed up, a pickup of the energy shifting. At first, it was one experience, but as I kept doing them, I could feel this sort of speed up. It's hard to explain, but I'm sure you understand. But I'd love you to chat about those in a little more detail if you could.
Yes. After Jesus dictated several books, he said he wanted me to start creating audios and teaching. And around that same time, he also said that my voice transmits, and so does my husband's. And he asked both of us if we would be willing to transmit energy. And of course, I was familiar with the idea of transmitting because many spiritual teachers, gurus talk about that. And so Jesus explained that it was like being an antenna, or like we're like acupuncture needles for their transmission, which allows that transmission to come into the planet more fully, more strongly. Even though that transmission can just come to this planet and does affect people just by calling upon it, apparently if there are people whose bodies prepared for that, to bring through that energy, it can be much more effective for people. And he explained that these transmissions would be able to accelerate people's spiritual evolution. And by that is largely meant that it seems people feel that it advances their capacity to be at a distance from their egoic mind, from their negativity, from that voice in our head, which really creates all the suffering in all of humanity. And so that is the experience that so many people do have, but there are all sorts of subtle experiences, and Jesus says that he brings the experience to each person that is needed for that person. So it's very individualized. And there's also a circle of ascended masters that Jesus is working with to give these transmissions. And while we're giving them, we just put some music on, as you know. We're just silent. And I find that my arms want to move in certain ways, and so I just let that happen. But it's just a silent giving and receiving of this transmission, and all that people need to do is to be really open and willing to receive the help that is there for us from other dimensions.
Gina, this term of like being awakened, we're still human, but yet, if someone really wanted to awaken, it's not like it's this sudden pow, I'm a different being. Can you sort of describe how it feels internally for you?
Sure. The experience is a shift of identity. What I usually described it as, before awakening, I was a me who occasionally had experiences of what I would call my higher self, almost always in meditation, but also sometimes when I was running to music or doing other very focused activity where you're very present, right? So I experienced what I called higher self a lot because I spent a lot of time doing these focused activities like meditation or running to music or riding my bike to music, which you're not supposed to do, but I used to do that too. But I would always return, my sense of self would always return to being me with all my stories and my problems and, my history and all of that. So when awakening happens, what really happens is that your center of self shifts away from the me, and it lands in what I call the higher self, but it's really the true self. I usually use that term these days, the true self or the divine self. So in a sense, what happened is that my identity shifted to that place that I knew quite well through meditation, and it stayed there. And so then the whole sense of me fell away like a pile of old clothes on the floor. Like, you know,
Just got that visual when you said that.
Yeah, I couldn't reanimate the me.
Yeah.
And so then at that point, you have to begin to learn how to live as this other sense of yourself. And the sense of yourself is very spacious. And it's just a sense of being aware of the me, perhaps, aware of the mind, aware of everything that's happening and having no evaluations or judgments, a sense of peace, contentment, joy, relaxation. Being in the flow is one way that people experience that. But it's a very present moment way of living, because you've seen through the falseness of the thoughts about the past and the thoughts about the future, and you realize that you don't need to dwell on the past or the future, that all is well here and now, and you can just be and experience whatever you're experiencing, and what you need arises within you. If you need to know something or some guidance, it arises within you. Urges to move and do things arise within you. And of course, everybody knows what that is, really. They've had experiences of that. But it is that you become more established in this way of being, and you don't get fooled any longer by thinking you're that small suffering self that is never good enough and always lacking something and always having to strive and push and still never being good enough, never being happy enough. You know you're not that anymore, and you don't contract into that space very often. And if you do, it's for a very short time.
You know, that's a really important point you just brought up when you said, you know, you're not bad anymore. That's a really big, I think, really that's what, I mean, I'm reading the Course in Miracles, and it's really, that's the biggest thing they talk about, you know, you're not bad anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think that these transmissions that I've been attending of yours has been really peeling that away from me. Mm-hmm. And there's a very special frequency in them that I haven't experienced anywhere else, where I find that sometimes the next day, you know, be careful what you ask for, because you want to awaken and you start, all this stuff comes out, because it's like, we need to clear this out. You know, that's a big thing, is the guilt. You know, I notice I'm listening to your book, Jesus Speaks. Mm-hmm. And just some of the messages in there are so powerful. Can you chat a little bit about that book for me?
Sure. There are, in the transmissions that we've been holding for over a year now, before we do the transmission, I play a recorded message, a recorded channeled message from Jesus that helps prepare people for the transmission. And these little 15-minute recordings have been put into 2 audiobooks called Jesus Speaking on Awakening to Love and Jesus Speaking on Embodying Christ Consciousness. And you can also buy them as a ebook or paperback, but they're really meant to be listened to, because Jesus wants to have a relationship with people, with those who are open to receiving these transmissions. And I was really happy to provide those messages, because I've always wanted to share the experience that I have, the very intimate experience that I have of talking to him in my mind, because I just can have a dialogue with him. And just like I'm sitting with you having a dialogue, I can ask a question, receive an answer. And so there's lots of comfort. It's really wonderful to be connected to such a wise and compassionate being as Jesus and the other ascended masters. And so I wanted other people to experience that. And the best way is to create these little audios where they can hear him. And I try to, when I'm channeling these messages, I try to, I don't need to say try, but I move into a place of channeling where Jesus' energy overlaps my energy, and the words come out with a certain intonation and certain way of speaking that isn't how I speak, although it's not very different. It's not unusual. It's, I don't have an accent or something like that.
Right.
But there is a different feeling that comes through those words. And people do feel that, and they often say they experience a transmission through listening to those messages too.
Well, I love that book because I listen to it when I'm driving to my shows, and I just want to submerge myself around it as much as I can. And so I thank you for, the light and the wonderful messages that come through you from him. And my relationship with him is definitely strengthened through your book. And of course, through the transmissions have been fantastic. A question for you: if you were to give some advice to someone that is on a spiritual path, but maybe their partner isn't.
Oh, that's interesting. There's lots of people like that. Sometimes it works if the partner is very accepting and allowing of you to do whatever is right for you. And so it certainly can work as long as that partner isn't holding you back from being who you are meant to be, from unfolding as you need to spiritually, and who is hopefully supportive also, perhaps interested or curious, but not necessarily. Mostly they just don't need to be, they need to just not be judgmental or holding you back. So I've seen relationships work where one person was seriously on the path and their partner wasn't. And sometimes those arrangements are even where there's a soul agreement where that person is there to support that person financially on the path, or for some other reason that actually is supportive for their life purpose.
That's a good point.
So it works for the two of them.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult and not advantageous if you have a partner who is critical and you're just not able to be comfortable around them as you are.
Now, Gina, when you started the transmissions, would you say that now they're very clear? Like, was there a point where that started to change, like it got clearer and clearer, or has it always been similar?
I think it's been similar. I don't think it's changed. I don't think it's gotten stronger over time. I think that my internal experience has gotten stronger. I experience it much more. I'm much more out of the way than I was in the beginning. I think I move into a place of samadhi, of absorption when I'm doing that, so I'm much more comfortable. Part of that is I'm more comfortable with the whole idea of giving a transmission and people staring at me on the video and that kind of thing. So,
right.
But Jesus has told me that my particular state is not that important, so that it doesn't affect it that much. Maybe because I'm, pretty grounded in this space overall. So I'm certainly, I'm never in a bad space when I'm giving a transmission. When I'm doing our online gatherings, I'm always in a good space. So it isn't really an issue, but I'm told that it isn't so critical what my personal state of consciousness is.
Well, does Gina Lake have a bad day, or like what? Share a little bit about that. Is there stuff that I'm human still,
Yeah. Yes, I can have a bad day. For many years after awakening, I still would cycle in and out of certain level of depression.
Okay.
until about 3 years ago. And then that pretty much stopped. So that took a long time to work itself out. But even when that was going on, I didn't suffer to the extent that I would have in the past, because I saw it as it was like clouds that just moved in, and I knew that they would leave,
Right.
and then I'd be back again. So it didn't actually bother me. And I have a genetic history, family genetic history of depression, so it's not surprising. I've heard that other spiritual teachers have that. But surprisingly, the last 3 years, I have not experienced that. I think the worst that I experience is minor annoyance.
Okay.
And even that you can just be kind of in relationship to, it's your personality grousing about something, but you don't really take it seriously.
Right.
And my husband doesn't take it seriously, fortunately.
Yeah.
But I rarely, in the last 20 years, I think I've cried maybe 5 times. And when that happens, it's like a storm that blows through, and it's like a releasing that happens.
Right.
It's very clean, and then it's gone. So I don't experience a lot of emotion beyond annoyance. And I say annoyance as opposed to anger, because I could not take anger very seriously.
Right.
If it arose strongly, I would pretty soon laugh at it.
That's fabulous. I wanted to ask, you mentioned the crying thing. I know there's a lot of people that I'm talking to that are on their path awakening, and they definitely go through periods of a lot of sorrow or grief, and so was that something you did experience in any degree?
I used to hold regular pity parties for myself before awakening. I was really into wallowing into sadness, because I'm a Pisces, right? So kind of a drama queen. So I used to really wallow in my sadness. And so the fact that I never felt sad and crying never happened after awakening was really surprising. So there was definitely conditioning that rose up to be seen and to be released after awakening, as is what usually happens for people. But that was, it was more along the lines of working with anger. So I guess you could say that my conditioning was anger was my go-to emotion, although sadness was my go-to emotion before awakening. So, who knows? Who knows?
Right. Different for everybody, I guess.
Yeah.
What is new and exciting that's kind of unfolding for the Radical Happiness? I know you have a lot of new things cooking and courses and stuff. Do you care to share just a little bit about that?
Well, the newest thing is that I've been offering the guided meditations from Jesus that have been part of our gatherings, our Christ Consciousness Transmission gatherings. And I put them together. There are 20 of them, and I put them together in, it's an online course platform. It's not really a course. It's just a means of accessing these guided meditations, one a week for 20 weeks. And so that's called Deep Peace Guided Meditations from Jesus. So that's the newest thing. And I'm really needing to take a break, because I had been working so hard since fall. So I'm taking a break, but I am about to start a new project. I was just informed about what it is, and it's going to be a little different. And it's a book that will be read by me. So it also is meant to be listened to. And it's going to be
on audible.com?
Yes, I will put it up there.
Okay.
It's going to be like a lecture series. Instead of short messages, it'll be longer longer messages, like large chapters on things. And I think it's going to be called What Jesus Wants You to Know Today, about the world, himself, God, life, anything else? Maybe something else.
I'm in.
Yeah, so it's I'm sure there will be teachings in there, but the books I've written so far have been all about his teachings. Now he's going to talk a little bit about who he is, what's going on, and how he sees the world, his perception. So it's going to be a little bit different, more informational from his perspective. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's in that.
Do you have a rough timeline of when that might be available on Audible for us?
Oh, I could just guess that, it takes a long time it takes as long to create an audiobook as to write the book. It's really quite time consuming. So I could get the book done in a couple months, in 8 weeks, and then it'll take me another probably 6 weeks or 8 weeks to record it. Mm-hmm. So we'll see.
Oh yeah, it's a big job.
Yeah.
Well, Gina, I would love to ask just some fun little questions, like for Gina, because you're still here as Gina, expressing yourself on this plane, and I call this just the fun corner part of it. But if you could choose, Gina, between flying or shape-shifting as a superhero power, which one would it be?
Flying.
And why?
Because it feels so free.
Yeah.
I get to fly in my dreams sometimes, and I love that.
I love that. Okay. Would you rather know every language in the world or mind telepathy, but only with one person at a time, mind telepathy?
Oh, mind telepathy by far.
Okay, cool. If you had to spend 2 years on an island with someone that is not in form at this time, who would it be and why?
Oh, well, how about Jesus?
Right, hello.
Yeah.
I love that. And
what a great companion.
Yeah, oh yeah. The best ice cream in the world or the best pie in the world for the only dessert you could ever eat?
Oh, ice cream.
Ice cream, okay.
But it has to be chocolate.
Chocolate, okay. And last question, what is sort of a summed up little blurb of advice you would give someone if they came to you and said, what can I take away with so that I can feel like I'm on the right path or something? Is there a little special advice you could share?
Well, I know this isn't very exciting or popular advice, but meditate. It's so important. I meditated a lot before I awakened. I spent so much time, as I said earlier, in that meditative state, either meditating or in presence while I was doing something. Okay. And that lays the groundwork for awakening. And, when you are present, when you learn to be present, it doesn't matter if you've had an awakening or not, because every time you're present, that's like being awakened. Right. So everyone can experience awakeness without being awakened. You just have to learn to be in presence. And the way you learn to be in presence is to meditate.
Wonderful. And I can see how that can build up momentum. It's like anything, really, when you do something consistently enough.
Oh, yes. And you have to do it consistently, daily, over time, and meditate for an hour a day in one sitting if you can, because you really don't get there unless you sit down and do it for more than 45 minutes at a time.
No kidding. Well, Gina, I want to thank you for your graciousness and your beauty and your courage. And of course, I will be putting your website on the bottom of the video. So would that be radicalhappiness.com that you'd want people to contact you through?
Yes, that's great.
And then are you offering private sessions or no? Your husband does, correct?
Right. I'm not doing that any longer. Yes, okay. But my husband does.
Okay. Is there any other information, just the website? And do you want your Facebook? Is that something people can go to as well?
Sure. Facebook is fine. I have a group on there and I have a page and I post regularly and I'm on Twitter. So you can follow me on either of those.
Awesome.
But my website has lots and lots.
It really does. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Well, Gina, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I will be seeing you on the transmissions.
Oh, thank you so much, Ninette. So sweet to connect with you here.
Yes, wonderful to meet you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much to Gina Lake for joining me on Spiritual Nerd. And again, I look forward to the next time when we be geeking out with you.
Let's talk about life, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the truth and consciousness, divinity. Let's talk about God. Let's talk about love.